I still remember the smell. That's what people never tell you about plane crashes. Everyone talks about the fire, the screaming, the impact, but nobody mentions the smell that comes after. When you're lying there in the wreckage, in the snow, and the silence finally settles in, that's when you realize the worst part isn't the crash itself. It's what comes next. My name is David Chen, and I'm the only survivor of Flight 721. But survival isn't what you think it is. Because for 7 days I slept next to the bodies of everyone I'd been laughing with just hours before. It was supposed to be a routine flight. December 15th, 2019. I was heading home to Denver for the holidays, carrying nothing but a carry-on and a headache from the conference I'd just left. Flight 721 was a small regional carrier, one of those planes that seats maybe 40 people if you pack them in tight. I remember thinking how lucky I was to get a window seat. 3 hours in the air, and I'd be home in time for dinner with my parents. I had my headphones in before we even took off, some podcast about true crime. The irony isn't lost on me now. The flight attendant, her name was Sarah. I learned that later from the manifest. She had this warm smile when she did the safety demonstration. I wasn't paying attention. Nobody ever does. We all just assume we'll land safely because that's what happens 99.9% of the time. But I was in that 0.1%. And let me tell you, those safety instructions I ignored, they probably wouldn't have mattered anyway. We were about 90 minutes into the flight when things went wrong. I dozed off, which I'm grateful for now because it meant I was relaxed when the first jolt hit. Not tense, not braced. The plane dropped, and I mean really dropped, like someone had cut the strings holding us up. My stomach lurched into my throat. People started screaming immediately. The oxygen masks dropped, dangling like twisted party streamers. I grabbed mine, fumbling with shaking hands, and that's when I looked out the window. We were in a storm. I hadn't noticed it building because I'd been asleep, but now I could see lightning splitting the darkness, illuminating massive clouds that looked like mountains. The plane was shaking so hard I thought my teeth would rattle out of my skull. The lights inside the cabin were flickering on and off, and in those brief moments of darkness the screaming got louder, more desperate. The pilot came on the intercom, his voice cracking with static. He said something about turbulence, about staying calm, about preparing for an emergency landing. But I could hear it in his voice, the fear, the uncertainty. And that's when I knew we weren't going to make it. Not to Denver. Maybe not anywhere. I don't remember the actual impact. That's a mercy, I suppose. My brain just shut off like someone flipping a switch. 1 second I was gripping the armrests so hard my knuckles were white, and the next second I was waking up to absolute silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, oppressive, like the world itself is holding its breath. Everything hurt. That was my first conscious thought. Everything hurts. My chest, my legs, my head. I reached up and felt something wet and warm on my forehead. Blood. My blood. But I was alive. I was breathing. I could move my fingers, my toes. I was alive. The plane had split in half. I was still strapped into my seat, but the row in front of me was just gone. Ripped away. Through the gap I could see snow, mountains, trees that looked like dark fingers clawing at a gray sky. It was so cold, the kind of cold that bites into your lungs when you breathe. That's when I started looking around, started seeing. The woman across the aisle from me, she was still in her seat too. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing. There was no blood, no obvious injury. She just looked asleep. But I knew. I could tell. Sarah, the flight attendant, she was pinned under a piece of the overhead compartment. I called out to her, called out to anyone. My voice sounded small and pathetic against the wind that was howling through the broken fuselage. Nobody answered. I don't know how long I sat there before I finally unbuckled my seatbelt. Could have been minutes, could have been an hour. Time felt broken, fragmented. But eventually, survival instinct kicked in. I had to move, had to check if anyone else made it, had to find shelter because that wind was brutal, and I was already shivering uncontrollably. I counted 42 people on that plane, including crew. I checked every single one of them. Some were obviously gone. injuries too severe to survive. Others, like the woman across from me, just looked peaceful, like they'd simply stopped. I found the pilot still in the cockpit, or what was left of it. The co-pilot was gone, ejected through the windshield probably. And through all of this, I kept hoping, kept thinking that maybe, just maybe, someone else would stir, would wake up and we could figure this out together. But it was just me, alone at over 10,000 feet on some remote mountainside with 41 dead people, and a plane that would never fly again. The rear section of the plane had survived relatively intact. That became my home. I dragged myself back there, past bodies I tried not to look at too closely. And I found blankets in the overhead bins, found jackets, found a first aid kit that I used to bandage the gash on my head. My left leg was badly bruised, maybe cracked, I couldn't tell. But I could walk on it if I went slow. Night fell fast in the mountains. 1 minute there was gray light and the next it was pitch black. The temperature dropped even further. I wrapped myself in every blanket I could find, and I huddled in that rear section, listening to the wind scream outside. And that's when the reality hit me. Really hit me. I was going to die here too, just slower than everyone else. But I didn't die that first night. I woke up the next morning, shocked to be alive, shocked that I'd actually slept. The sun was out, weak and watery, but it was light, and light meant hope. I could see the landscape now, mountains in every direction, covered in snow and pine trees. No houses, no roads, no signs of civilization at all. We'd gone down in the absolute middle of nowhere. I started thinking practically. Survival. I'd watched enough documentaries, read enough stories. I needed water, food, warmth, and rescue. Water was easy. Snow everywhere. I could melt it using metal pieces from the plane held over a small fire. Fire was harder. I found a lighter in someone's jacket pocket. Felt like grave robbing, but I pushed that thought away. They didn't need it anymore. I needed it to survive. Food was the real problem. There were snacks in the galley, peanuts, pretzels, some cookies. Maybe enough for a few days if I rationed carefully. And I had to ration because I had no idea when rescue would come. If rescue would come. I spent that second day trying to make myself visible. I dragged pieces of the plane into an open area, arranged them to spell out SOS, used luggage, seat cushions, anything bright that would contrast against the snow. Then I waited, watched the sky for planes, for helicopters, listened for the sound of engines, but there was nothing except wind and the occasional call of a bird. The bodies started to bother me more on the third day. Not just emotionally, though, that was its own nightmare, but practically. They were freezing, preserved by the cold, but they were still there, constant reminders of what had happened, of how lucky and unlucky I was simultaneously. I started covering them with blankets. It felt respectful, made it easier to move around without seeing their faces. That night, the third night, I slept next to them because I had no choice. The rear section only had so much space, and moving bodies seemed worse somehow than just accepting their presence. I told myself they were just sleeping, just passengers on a delayed flight. It was the only way I could close my eyes. By day 4, I was starting to get weak. The rationing meant I was constantly hungry. The cold meant I was burning through calories just trying to stay warm. My leg hurt worse, had swollen up purple and black. I could barely put weight on it. And still, no rescue. No planes overhead. Nothing. I started talking to them, the bodies. I know how that sounds, but isolation does things to your mind. I'd narrate what I was doing, tell them about my plan for the day, ask them questions I'd answer myself. The woman across the aisle, I learned her name was Patricia from her wallet. I told Patricia about my family, about how worried they must be, about how my mom probably hadn't stopped crying since they heard about the crash. The rational part of my brain knew this was concerning, but the survival part didn't care. The survival part just needed to hear a voice, even if it was my own. Needed to feel less alone in that frozen graveyard. Day 5 was when I started losing hope, really losing it. My food was almost gone. My leg was infected. I could tell from the smell and the way it throbbed with heat despite the cold everywhere else. And still, no rescue. I began to wonder if they were even looking. If they'd given up. If they thought everyone was dead and it wasn't worth the resources to search remote mountain ranges in winter. I wrote letters that night, found paper in the plane, a pen that still worked. Wrote to my parents, my sister, my friends. Told them I loved them. Told them I was sorry for every argument, every missed call, every time I took them for granted. I put the letters in a Ziploc bag from the galley and tucked them into my jacket pocket. If they found my body, at least they'd have that. Day 6, I could barely walk. The infection in my leg had spread. I was feverish and delirious. I remember having full conversations with Patricia, with Sarah the flight attendant, with the businessman who'd been sitting behind me. They talked back in my fever dreams, told me to hold on, told me rescue was coming, told me I couldn't give up now. I don't remember much of Day 7. Just fragments. The sound of something mechanical, distant but getting closer. The way light looked through my fever, all halos and stars. The feeling of hands on me, lifting me. Voices that weren't my own, weren't my imagination. Real voices saying real words like survivor and alive and we've got you. The helicopter pilot later told me that they'd almost given up. The storm had made searching impossible for days, and protocol said after a week, you're looking for bodies, not survivors. But something made them do one more pass, one more sweep of the area, and they saw my SOS, saw the wreckage, saw me stumbling out into the snow, waving weakly at the sky. I spent 2 months in the hospital, surgery on my leg to clean out the infection, treatment for frostbite on my fingers and toes, psychological evaluation after psychological evaluation. Everyone wanted to know how I survived, what my secret was, and the truth is, I don't know. Luck, mostly. The fact that I was sitting in just the right spot when we went down. The fact that the rear section stayed intact. The fact that the weather cleared just enough for that helicopter to fly. But here's what I learned from those 7 days. Survival isn't heroic. It's not brave or noble. It's just stubborn. It's your body refusing to quit even when your mind wants to. It's doing the next necessary thing, then the next, then the next. Not because you're strong, but because stopping means dying. And when you're alone on a mountain with 41 dead people, dying starts to look pretty appealing. The guilt is the hardest part. I survived and they didn't. Why? What made me special? What made my life worth saving over Patricia's or Sarah's or any of the others? I've been in therapy for years now, and my therapist says it's not about worth. It's about chance. Random, meaningless chance. But that doesn't make it easier. I still have nightmares. Not about the crash itself, but about the quiet. That heavy silence of the mountain. And I still sometimes wake up expecting to see bodies covered in blankets, expecting to smell that nobody talks about. The smell of a plane crash. The smell of survival. People ask me if I still fly. The answer is yes, but it's complicated. Every time I board a plane, I count the exits. I listen to the safety demonstration. I look at my fellow passengers and wonder who would survive if we went down. Would it be the young guy in the exit row, the mother with 2 kids, the elderly man with the military posture, or would it be random again? Just chance and physics and the cruel mathematics of disaster? I went back once, to the crash site. 3 years later, after I'd finished physical therapy and could hike again. The wreckage was still there, decomposing slowly in the harsh mountain weather. Nature was reclaiming it, rust and vines and snow. It looked smaller than I remembered. Less terrifying, just metal and plastic and the remnants of lives interrupted. I stood there for a long time and I talked to them again, Patricia and Sarah and all the others. Told them I was sorry. Sorry for surviving when they didn't. Sorry for using their things to stay alive. Sorry for sleeping next to their bodies because I was too weak and scared to do anything else. I don't know if they heard me. I don't know if there's anything after death to hear with. But I said it anyway because I needed to. The official report said pilot error combined with mechanical failure. The storm stressed a weakened component, and the pilots made a judgment call that turned out wrong. But knowing why doesn't change what happened, doesn't bring anyone back, doesn't erase those 7 days. I'm 34 now. The crash was 5 years ago. I have a life, a job, friends, even started dating someone recently. But I'm different. How could I not be? I've seen things, done things that most people can't imagine. I've lived through something that statistically should have killed me, and I carry that with me every single day. Sometimes people recognize me, from the news coverage, from the interviews I did right after. They want to shake my hand, tell me I'm inspiring, ask me for advice. And I never know what to say because the truth isn't inspiring. The truth is I got lucky and 41 people didn't, and I spent a week sleeping next to their bodies because I was too selfish to die with them. But I'm still here, still breathing, still moving forward one day at a time, and maybe that's the real lesson. Not that survival is heroic, but that it's possible, even when everything is broken, even when you're alone, even when the world is nothing but cold and silence and loss. You can still wake up the next morning, still take the next breath, still choose to keep going. Because if I learned anything on that mountain, it's that humans are remarkably hard to kill. Our bodies want to live even when our minds don't. Our hearts keep beating even when we wish they'd stop. And sometimes, against all odds, against all reason, we survive. Not because we deserve to, not because we earned it, but because in that moment, in that terrible twist of fate, we were simply the ones who didn't die. That's my story. That's what happened to the only survivor of Flight 721. I slept next to the bodies for a week, and then I came back to tell you about it. Not because it's uplifting or inspirational, but because it's true. And maybe, just maybe, someone else out there who survived something impossible needs to hear it. Needs to know they're not alone in feeling guilty for being alive. Needs to know that you can live through the unlivable and still find reasons to keep going. I'll never forget those 7 days. I'll never forget their faces, but I'm still here, still fighting, still surviving. And I suppose that's all any of us can do.